Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to a special edition of This is Revolution podcast. Usually on Wednesdays, it's either going to be a Red Zone episode or a Mama. And we decided to do a special episode with an old guest from way back, Harvey, Kaye. So if you have been watching this show for the last 5 years now, I've been doing this. But when I first started doing live streams, Harvey was nice enough to be a guest on my show a few times. But I will be joined with my Red Zone co-host, Mac.
Hello, everyone.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Well, I think I'm better than you because I don't really have anything invested in the San Francisco Giants anymore. It's just nostalgia for me.
Yeah.
And you are wearing your Guardians hat, which means you're really all in on
I'm wearing my Cavs hat tonight because my Guardians hat I lifted in this morning and I gotta let it dry out still.
You're a better man than me because
your boy had a great lift this morning. Great lift. Phenomenal.
I refuse to work out in my sports hats.
Well, these ones are floppy and they're made to. I got nice ones, like flat bill fitted hats that I rock when I'm gallivanting about town.
That's what those hats are for. They're for gallivanting about town.
That's right. When you want to look like a gentleman, you wear your flat billed fitted sports caps, And I just hope everybody watching and listening is prepared for us to do a Wednesday show that is serious.
We can be serious for our usual serious time, and then I think we reserve the right to go off the rails.
I'm here for it. But Jason, people in chat are saying you need to get your mic hooked up.
I thought it is. It's not.
Newry is complaining already. We're like 2 minutes in, Newry's already going off, man.
I don't know what to say because it says that I am.
No? Oh, that's much better, Jason.
You could have told me that 5 minutes ago.
I just thought we were being more quiet than usual.
Wow.
Yeah. I put my serious hat on when you were like, hey, you got to come on, man. And I read the comic, and I am not going to lie, I have a few adult beverages with me tonight. Because it was a day at work where I promptly clocked out at 5. And they were like, hey, man. I was like, nope, clocked out. Got to go. Bye. I was like, I'm not dealing with you assholes today. Can't do it.
Well, here, let's read this introduction and introduce our guests.
That's right.
In a time when the promises of democracy and economic security seem increasingly out of reach for many, Harvey J. Kaye's work serves as a crucial reminder of the progressive potential embedded in American history. In his book, The Four Freedoms, Franklin D. Roosevelt and the Evolution of an American Idea, Kaye revisits FDR's 1941 State of the Union address, where Roosevelt articulated the four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. These principles were not merely rhetorical, they laid the groundwork for the New Deal and shaped the social contract between the American government and its citizens. Now in collaboration with the Letterhack, comic artist, the Letterhack, Kaye has reimagined this legacy through the comic The Economic Bill of Rights, a modern-day call to action that seeks to rekindle the radical spirit of the New Deal era. This vision of economic justice and social democracy is not just a relic of the past, but a roadmap for the future, a future where, as Kaye asserts, the American people might rise up and demand a government that truly represents them. Today, we delve into Kaye's argument for why these freedoms are more relevant than ever and discuss how the left can leverage his historical framework to advance a progressive agenda in the 21st century. Please welcome both the artist and the contributor, returning guest, the Letterhack.
Hello.
And coming all the way live from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Harvey J. Kaye.
Thanks for having us. Good to be here. Very good. It's been a long time, Jason, or at least it feels like a long time.
It's been a minute. I got hit up by Matt or the Letterhack to say, hey, I got this new comic thing. I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. As someone who loves pop culture, who loves everything from comics to movies, and of course, you know, my passion, music.
Rub it in, dude. Just keep rubbing it in.
Well, look, spent a lot of years being really broke, traveling all over the planet.
A lot of good stories, though.
Sounds cool until you wake up and you're 47 and you have no savings.
Hey,
but I have great stories. Yeah, I do.
Hey, I do too. And you know what? We're kindred spirits there, Jason. We're in the same boat together.
Is that where this meshes? Because both of these guys, you could be an art teacher. I can't teach anybody music. It would be really bad.
Oh,
it would be like, dude, just turn it up.
Just to be clear, though, like proclaiming that I am an art teacher, it really just means that I attempt to impart art on kids. So teaching
are you an art teacher in the same way that Ray Gunn is a breakdance professor?
Yeah, probably. But
okay, can we
I have results. I do.
Can we not bag on Ray Gunn? Okay, she's in her late 30s. Saw her chance to go to the Olympics.
She did, dude. She's trolling everybody right now. She's trolling everyone. Harvey, do you know who Ray Gunn is? The woman
I was about to ask.
The Australian.
She's the Australian woman at the Olympics that was doing that weird kangaroo stuff. They had the first ever breakdancing in the Olympics.
I would say it's the only breakdancing ever in the Olympics.
If I actually had an event of breakdancing, no.
Yeah. And some of it was great. Others, it was like, I thought for sure you would have to qualify before they will let you compete.
We got some inside dope on the Ray Gun stuff, and we will talk about it later if you guys want to. But one of the people that actually have been on the show and watched the show know her, and they were both professors and cultural arts majors in Australia.
Oh, that is amazing. You just made my entire week.
I just want you to know that my assumptions were correct. That's all that matters about the whole thing.
But getting a message every so often. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine. We can hear you just fine. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Because I was getting a signal. You guys were breaking up on me, and it said, "Oops."
Oh, sorry.
Recording. Somehow the connection was being
messy.
It was like,
no, we can hear you.
I thought for a moment that Matt had a really strange voice all of a sudden that he was playing with.
No, he's not disguising his voice at the moment.
Not yet.
No. I am. I mean, honestly, Letterhack, I've been way too public with who I am. I can't pull it back now.
Damn it. I'm sorry. I keep saying I'm gonna stop. Mac, you have the questions too. I'm just gonna have you ask us.
Well, wait. Let me before we go too far. I know this was meant to be a sports night, so I just want to make things clear that I'm wearing this, as people might end up saying, I'm wearing this baseball cap as opposed to my Green Bay Packers cap, for various reasons. One, the comic itself has me wearing the baseball cap. The comic itself, Matt portrayed me in this way, I think, right? Because it's rooted in my time on Michael Brooks' show, right? And the live show that we did in Brooklyn itself. So anyhow, it's all because of that. Otherwise, especially as we're about to enter football season, I would otherwise be wearing a Packers cap. And but this is in honor of the fact that we're talking about the comic, which I have a feeling all the work that Matt and I will do, the many volumes ahead of us, will always have me wearing the Beef of Brooklyn.
There's a couple other reasons too. One, because you wore that hat so often on the Michael Brooks show and other shows, I could grab reference of your face at different perspectives for depicting you in those positions. And also it made you look that much less like Larry David, which is what everyone is constantly bagging on me for, and we almost put that in the comic.
Yeah, we actually almost
Larry
did
David
that.
walking by, like Larry David walking by Harvey.
Yeah, we're saving that reference.
By the way, and I don't know if this is in my defense or merely an addition to what Matt was saying. People, when I have on a baseball cap, say that I look like Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah,
I can see it.
Which is better?
I prefer Jimmy Buffett to
Larry
David.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. I was never, ever, ever a fan of the Seinfeld show. It was not the New York I knew. I thought it was a bullshit Reagan-esque kind of show.
Ooh.
Wow.
Oh, we have to put a pin in that because I want to have Harvey talk more about why he thinks Seinfeld. But before we get into that,
Harvey, I love the choice of hat. Like that's the only cap I wear. I have the same exact one, and I really like the throwback hats in this style. So I have like an Expos one, Colt 45s, Washington Senators. You know, wow. I like the floppy hats. They fit my bald head better. And
that's exact.
You know,
great minds.
The head is structured. The hat is unstructured.
That's right. There we go.
That's great.
So Harvey, can you explain to us the 4 freedoms?
Yeah. Okay. So, in 1941, the United States had not entered the war, but FDR was seriously concerned about the likelihood that we would be attacked. And for what it's worth, they knew, though they did not expect it to come from Japan in the course of that year so readily, they expected actually a threat from Germany. And the reason I say that is however they had secured them, there were indications that Germany had gone into North Africa not merely to secure the oil available in North Africa to run their military machine, but they actually had a plan. They were going to drive south, and then the idea was to either get an alignment with or come across in Brazil. This is not a fantasy at all. This is what was on the plans. And in any case, they were funneling money into Mexico in hopes of buying off political people and others with the idea of sort of subversion from the South. This is exactly what. So anyhow, in 1941, as the year began, FDR was concerned about sustaining Britain and its ability to withstand the Blitzkrieg. So he proposed at the end of 1940, just after he won re-election, an election to a 4th term as president, he proposed a Lend-Lease Act that we would turn the United States into the arsenal of democracy so that Britain and some other countries would be able to withstand Nazi Germany. In January, at the State of the Union message, he had decided not only to talk about the threat of an attack and the idea of the arsenal of democracy, he was also determined to tell Americans that if we went on a war footing, it would not necessarily mean an end to the reforms that were pursued in the 30s, known as the New Deal. And in fact, he said that it was imperative, if the United States was to be able to fight in the war, or withstand an attack, that Americans needed to be in better shape, which meant that all Americans should have certain kinds of needs met. And he then, late in the speech, said that Americans should begin to imagine a world ahead, a post-war world characterized by 4 fundamental human freedoms: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship. Both of those are essentially in the Bill of Rights that are part of the Constitution. But then he went on and argued, or not argued, he promised the pursuit of freedom from want, which was very much at the heart of the New Deal, and freedom from fear. And I'll just point out that people listening, even those who are gaining the least from what we would call capitalist America, saw themselves at a moment where they could aspire to secure equal rights. And what I mean by that is North and South, African Americans who heard the speech on radio believed that when they said freedom from one, this applied to poor whites as well, believed that that was a promise that in the near future, the United States would seriously address the inequalities and the needs of all Americans. But the other thing was freedom from fear. They heard as a promise that soon enough, the United States and the government would do something about Jim Crow laws in the South, apartheid, which we might call it, and Jewish Americans in the North who had been attacked by right-wing neo-fascist mobs would be more secure on the streets of Boston in particular. So so that speech itself resonated, and it became eventually the theme or the sort of the ethos of why we were fighting in World War II. The comic itself makes solid reference to that particular speech because it lays the groundwork for the speech that he made 3 years later in 1944 at that January State of the Union message. It became known as the Economic Bill of Rights speech. And that was a speech in which he actually lays out a vision of the United States adding more rights to the Constitution, which would include very basic material rights, such as healthcare, guarantees of education, the food, clothing, and shelter kinds of things. In other words, decent housing. And the reason that he went from the For Freedom speech, the visionary speech, to that is the fact that they did polling between 41 and 44, actually, especially in 43. And the polls showed that the overwhelming majority of Americans wanted a more social democratic America. That is, for example, 85% of Americans in these polls said they wanted universal health care, guaranteed health care for all Americans. They said they wanted free public education as far as one's abilities could take one. They wanted decent, comfortable housing. And this empowered FDR to make that speech, and by no means to have it projected out of his own mind and aspirations, but rather to reflect and articulate the aspirations of, again, the overwhelming majority of Americans. I don't know if I said before, 85% of Americans wanted universal health care. 85%. It was 95% of Democrats and 75% of Republicans. So basically, when Americans entered the war, it was to save the United States, not having already saved it from the Depression, to save it from fascist attack from the Nazis and the German imperial forces. But it was also the case that Americans believed that they were fighting for the ability to take the United States in a more social democratic direction after the war. So that's the four freedoms, and to set the stage.
Harvey, I've got a two-part question for you, my friend.
Okay.
How were Americans in such a position to kind of push for social democratic changes, considering what Wilson enabled as president, the very draconian laws towards the end of the war, in the First World War, that honestly led to Eugene Debs being imprisoned,
right,
for nonsense. And the second part is, how were Americans willing to, and let's face it, you had some coming of age people. Let's say your average draftee is 18 to 20. We're going into 1940. They're in their 40s. They're kind of like the power block there. What led to the sea change, in their opinion, to lean into that social democracy, considering that Wilson kind of did an end around and locked things down and was, his laws were far more draconian.
Of course, Wilson. We're talking 1914 to 1918, World War I. Actually, he was elected in 1912, so president 1913 to 1921, I guess, would have been right into that new year. Anyhow, so in the 1920s, capital ruled in America. Okay, number one. Number two, immigration was all but eliminated in this country, except, by the way, from Mexico, where Mexicans could come in because landowners, the plantation owners in Texas and the Southwest and California, they wanted that labor. They were allowed in. There was no limit on Latin American migration into the United States during those years. But the other thing is this, that labor was pretty much crushed during the 20s. However, when FDR ran for office in 1932, when his first run for the president, he had told people that given the depression that had begun in the late 1920s and was wrecking the American economy and destroying American lives, that he thought it was time for the United States to go radical for at least one, fairly radical is what he said, for at least one generation. And he laid out in the campaign of 32 a New Deal, okay, which was to include everything from old age pensions, meaning Social Security, unheard of before in the United States. It was going to secure jobs for Americans. They were going to build houses. They were going to improve the environment. I mean, it was a mass, if you like, array of programs that were implied in that campaign. And that's exactly what they did. And in the course of the 1930s, this is critical because your question is really important. How was it that they could imagine doing it? What empowered them to do it? Well, for a start, during the 30s, there was enacted by FDR and the Democratic controlled Congress, the National Labor Relations Act. And that guaranteed, well, what it is, it set up the National Labor Relations Board and guaranteed workers the right to organize unions. And in the course of those years, new unions were formed and older unions expanded. Millions, and I'm not exaggerating, millions of workers organized and joined labor unions. Now, that gave FDR an organized base, not just people who wanted to vote for him, but an organized base. And to take this further, in 1936, when he was running for his second term of office, he said something in his acceptance speech at the Democratic Convention. This is great. This actually is my other truly favorite speech. Actually, I've got a lot of favorite speeches, but in this one, he says, he actually points his finger at the forces that are trying to undo his administration. Capitalists organized to try to bring down his presidency. They organized something called the American Liberty League. But working people were so committed to the New Deal and FDR that they didn't at all buy into it. So there was no grassroots base for this very elite organization, American Liberty League. But FDR then could turn around and point a finger, and he did so regularly. He called them the economic royalists. They were like the political royalists of the who would have blocked the revolution in 76. He said they're economic royalists. And he said, moreover, they complain that we want to overthrow American institutions. Well, there is something we do want to overthrow. We want to overthrow their power. He actually calls on Americans to see his presidency as not simply a rescue operation for the economy, but moreover, an empowerment of working people, which is what it became. And finally, he basically aspired to bring an end to the overbearing power of the long persistent Gilded Age power structure of what he called the corporate titans and the economic royalists. And he won the most incredible majority of votes in 1936, and the Democrats controlled Congress. The only thing that kept them from doing everything that FDR truly wanted, which is when Social Security was enacted in 1935, they left out agricultural workers and household workers because the Congress was controlled by the Democrats, but the long-standing chairs of the committees were Southern Democrats, white supremacists. Mm-hmm. And they did not want household workers and agricultural workers to have Social Security, or for that matter, union rights. So both the Social Security Act and the National Labor Relations Act did not empower household workers and agricultural workers. It also helped the California landowners because it meant that the very diverse agricultural workers out in California, Mexican and Filipino, and what were known as Okies, the folks from Oklahoma who were driven off their lands by capitalists and a Dust Bowl, when they got out to California, they would often get the shit beat out of them when they were trying to organize. If you ever get a chance, I know it's a big book, read The Grapes of Wrath, or at least see the movie The Grapes of Wrath. It'll reveal to you exactly what you need to know about that. Well, the point was, FDR, for all of his faults and failings, for all of the faults and failings of that generation, was in many ways a radical president. And the American people at that time were empowered and pursued radical transformations. They literally rebuilt the American infrastructure. They literally improved the American landscape. They rescued the plain states from the Dust Bowl by planting millions and millions of trees to block the winds that were driving the topsoil across the Midwest to the east as dust, aka the Dust Bowl. So that's for a start. They organized these labor unions. They created women's organizations to supervise, or in some ways police, the big corporations to try to hold down prices. They enacted Social Security. They enacted, as I said, the National Labor Relations Act. They organized in the New Deal a massive program of music, arts, theater that operated not only in the big cities with shows and other things, but went across the country with traveling shows. I mean, it was an incredible transformation in America. It was in some ways a revolutionary period. And so going into World War II, they were ready. Oh, not to mention, you've got the fact that you had the Civilian Conservation Corps, in which 2 million young American men and boys fought soil erosion and other environmental disasters. These are the folks who themselves then were drafted or enlisted, went into the factories of World War II. There was an understanding that the government would make sure that workers would be organized in unions during World War II, on the condition that the unions themselves did not call strikes during the wartime period. There were wildcat strikes, but they only lasted usually like a day. And that was just a way of giving the finger to the bosses and saying, there's only so much you can get out of us. So anyhow, that's how it worked, that they were empowered by their own labors, their own organizing, and the laws that FDR and the Democrats did actually pass. Does that help?
Yes, sir. I mean, if you guys want to read another great book about that program, the Bracero program, read All They Will Call You by Tim K. Hernandez. Phenomenal book. It's centered around a horrible accident. I helped do research where we mapped it when I was doing my undergrad at UNC Pembroke. So, but it's a phenomenal book about that very program you were talking about.
It's great.
But yeah, I mean, this is the thing. And you know, just to give you a little bit of background on me, Harvey, I'm a more tempered leftist now because of the influence of Jason Miles. And for me,
the angelic sounds of Jason.
Yes. And I appreciate Jason, because when we first became friends, I may have been a bigger proponent of violence than I am now. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, say no more. Say no more.
Yeah. But see, when we were talking about, like full disclosure, I consider myself a AA historian. I have a bachelor's degree in history, as well as a journalism degree. But when we're talking about the New Deal, okay, specifically, you've got this man in Franklin, Delano Roosevelt, who was as close to American royalty as you were going to get.
Yeah.
Right. His family is phenomenally wealthy, entrenched in New York State politics. His cousin was president.
They were rooted. Look, they were not only they were Dutch original. They were a Dutch family. They went way back in New York history.
Yeah.
Because as you might know, the Dutch actually settled the Hudson Valley before the English ever arrived.
New Amsterdam doesn't have the same ring as New York, right?
Right.
But how does a blue blood like that? I mean, is it an actual, like, I really want to change things, or is it we need to get radical and I latch onto it because I want to be president?
No, actually, I'm glad you asked. Well, for a start, he wanted to be president. There's no doubt about it. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
He wanted to be president ever since he was probably a teenager. Don't forget, his cousin was Teddy Roosevelt. and Franklin Roosevelt himself served in the Wilson administration. No, there was no doubt about Franklin Roosevelt's aspirations, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that even in as early as I think it was 1912, in a speech he gave in New York, he talked about the imperative. He was sort of implying the imperative of getting rid of the Gilded Age power structure. I mean, he was part of the reform elements in the Democratic Party, and they had it up to here with the Gilded Age power structure. But and then on top of that, in the early 20s, he was stricken with polio. And he was already committed to certain kinds of democratic reforms. There was no question. He was a progressive, capital P progressive Democrat. But it said, the people who knew him said that having been stricken with polio and basically, compelled to take to the wheelchair to move, although he eventually had braces and arduously was able to walk upright, but he couldn't do it without somebody holding on his arm, one of his sons or a military officer. In the 1920s, it said he became all the more humanized, to understand what it was like not to have the wherewithal to accomplish things. And on top of that, Eleanor Roosevelt, his wife, who originally was not as progressive as he was, but in the 1920s, she became very active in the Women's Trade Union League and some other organizations, which were decidedly progressive efforts at social reform. And she would bring home from her new friendships in the Women's Trade Union League, she would bring home to Hyde Park up in the Hudson Valley or to the townhouse they had in Manhattan, socialist labor organizers, Jewish women socialist labor organizers, immigrant Jewish women socialist labor organizers who had been involved in organizing the textile trade and other areas of industry in New York City. And they basically educated him to the needs of working people and the kinds of things that he ought to imagine doing. And when he then ran this was 1930, he said to this friend of his, who was one of the foremost figures in the field of social welfare, he said, it's time America goes radical for at least a generation. And let me explain to you one other thing. In Europe, fascism was on the march.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this great myth that FDR saved capitalism. Well, he obviously did save capitalism, but his primary intention was to save democracy because he was afraid that if Americans continued to suffer the Depression and could not trust their own government to address their needs, that they would resort to fascism. And by the way, I'm going to jump way ahead in history. I'm going to jump to the last 50 years. Back in the 1970s, the corporate bosses declared war on working people, on women's rights, and on the rights of people of color. And what we've seen for 50 years now is nothing less than a class war on working people in this country. And all you have to remember is class war doesn't always come by way of struggles in the streets. It can come literally by stripping people of their rights and making sure that they get paid less so you can accumulate more. Mm-hmm. That's class war from above. So think about this. 50 years of this. What happened in those 50 years to the Democratic Party that was once upon a time the party of FDR and the party in the 1960s of militant liberalism? Well, I'll tell you what happened to the party. Working people, especially white working people, but also we've seen more recently African-American and Latino working people shifting gears, moving towards Republicans. Why? They don't love Republicans. They had come to despise the folks who were screwing them, who were telling them this is what we're going to do, and then did not do it. Okay. And out here in Wisconsin, for example, the only reason that Trump could win in Wisconsin was the fact that workers in Wisconsin remembered who enacted NAFTA. Bill Clinton and the Democrats with Republican support, which was originally a George H.W. Bush idea. Yeah. The Democrats enacted NAFTA, which literally helped destroy a lot of the industrial base of Wisconsin. They ended aid to families with dependent children, an FDR New Deal reform. They mass incarcerated, right? Still with me?
Yep.
Okay. they deregulated under Carter and then Clinton finance and transportation.
Yes, sir.
And communications. And you saw the growth of, I mean, if big companies were big, they now became, all the bigger as they merged together. You know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And I'm missing one other thing I think I should mention.
Deregulation.
Yeah, the deregulation. And by the way, the real deregulation occurred late in the Clinton years when they deregulated the banks, the big banks. In FDR's presidency, there was passed the Glass-Steagall Act. What the Glass-Steagall Act did was it divided commercial banking, which is everyday, deposit banking, and investment banking, which is risk banking. Ever since the 30s, you could not have those two in the same bank operating together. Clinton, encouraged by Rubin and Sussman and Graham-Rudman Act, which was passed, they ended that regulation, and now you could have investment banking and commercial banking together.
Yeah.
By the way, paved the way then for 2007, 8, 9, and 10, the Great Recession. So just to put that in context, FDR was concerned that the Great Depression, if unaddressed, if the American people were not empowered and engaged, in rescuing the nation, they might well resort to the likes of a Mussolini. And by the way, sorry, I'm going off and on and on and on.
No, please.
In 1931, I think it was, in 30, 31, even to 32, major magazines like Vanity Fair actually called for the likes of a Mussolini in the United States.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I mean, we've had our run-ins with it. I mean, the Bush family was involved with an attempted putsch, in the years after the Second World War, or the First World War, excuse me. But and a lot of people did, because what did Mussolini do when he first came to power? Right,
he crushed the opposition.
But what was his key? What was his big thing? I made the trains run on time.
Yeah.
Right.
I could make a joke and say that's pretty good in Italy anytime.
Well, exactly, right? But I mean, that was a thing. That was one thing people depended on. And he's like, look what I did as a fascist. Yeah. I made the trains run on time.
Yeah.
And that's a foothold into it.
But what shouldn't forget, in 1918 to 20, Italy was part of the what do they call them at that time? The Allies in World War II. What was it in World War I? I guess they were the Allies then as well.
Yeah.
Italy was not with the Central Powers. It was not aligned with Germany in World War I. It was aligned with Britain and the United States and France. And
before you go on, Harvey, keep in mind, Italy came in very late.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. In 1918 to 1920, there was in northern Italy, in Milan and Turin and elsewhere, but especially in Turin, it was the occupation of the factories. Okay, the workers occupied the factories. These were socialist and communist workers, and corporate order was shaken in Italy, and thus fascism was supported, of course, by the moneyed class. And there you have it. Not to mention, in the South, you had the big landowners and the peasantry and so on. If you want to ever see it, talking to movies, you ever want to see a good movie, see 1900. 1900. It's literally set in southern Italy. I don't think it's Sicily, but I'm pretty sure it's southern Italy. And it's got an incredible cast. Donald Sutherland and Pacino, is it, or one of those guys, one of the Italian boys. And no, one of those, it's either Pacino or Quick.
See, Harvey gets them confused because they were Yankees fans.
They're
exactly. They were Yankees
those swarthy gentlemen. Those swarthy gentlemen with valves.
Right. No, swarthy. No, I mean I wasn't thinking like that. No, I always got Pacino. What? Quick, the other guy.
De Niro.
I always I can never keep them apart. Okay. When I see them, I know who they are, but as names, they flow together in my head. So those folks are in this. Sutherland plays a fascist. He's a piece of shit character in this. And also, I think Burt Lancaster's in it at the outset, or somebody like him. Gerard Depardieu, the French actor,
Oh,
Jesus
okay.
Christ,
in
they
it.
have like the whole gamut of just big names there.
Yeah, it was huge. But I will warn you, it's a 4+ hour long film, and it goes all the way from 1900 to the end of World War II, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, we're covering 45 years in 4
Yeah.
hours.
And
Okay.
it talks about, the socialism, capitalism, not communism, socialism, capitalism, and fascism. That's it.
Dun dun dun.
So now I've given you a history. So let's get to the Economic Bill of Rights comic.
Yes.
I want to talk to Letterhack about this.
Hit me.
Because he was the artist here. Let me pull it up. I have it ready to go.
Hey, Letterhack, I just want you to know I have like a million questions about comic books towards the end of this.
Okay. So we're gonna do you a favor now. we're gonna bring theater to your show tonight.
Oh boy.
Matt, are we gonna do that?
This is Harvey's favorite thing to do. He loves
I
it.
just think because I love
Just
this.
so you
I
know,
love this page. I love this page.
When we made this comic, he and I read it out loud all the way through. We were so thoughtful and considerate of every single line of
Were
dialogue.
you guys in the
and
same
panel.
place? Did you go out there?
No, zoomed it.
We did video
Interesting.
call, and I would share my screen, and we really made sure that everything was in place. Look, normally comic book artists don't have the benefit of hearing the script. They usually read the script and then they have to say, hey, author, just so you know, we're not going to be able to fit all that dialogue and an image in the panel. You're going to have to do some artful pruning and cut back on a lot of these words. But with Harvey and I, we put it right up on screen. I would slap some panels on a page, start putting the word balloons and caption boxes on there. And then I would come back with some really rough sketches and we would fine tune. And then not only until we had everything dialed just the way we wanted, would I then go back and like start refining the art. And then we reach a point of no return, whereas usually you're going one page at a time, trying to show it to the guy who wrote it. He has all these notes. We bypass that whole thing and streamline the process. But at one point, we had to read it out loud. Harvey insisted that we read the entire thing out loud and take different parts so that not only so we could hear it out loud, but because, we're in it as characters, and I could talk about our decision to do that a little if you like, but like we needed to be able to hear it and it had to make sense to us.
And is this going to be a physical book as well?
Well, that's the thing, is this is our primer to see if we wanted to see if we could work together. So I immediately suggested to Harvey, as I do to just about everyone who talks to me about things they're passionate about, that this should be a comic. And I was like, we could take any one of your books and or all of your books and start making comics out of them if you wanted to. I would be down with that. And then I realized that's a lot to ask someone to trust you to that degree, right? Like, trust me, I can make a comic and it's not going to be a waste of your time. So what I decided to do was, on top of like sending Harvey lots of sketches of him and Thomas Paine and him and Thomas Paine walking around Wisconsin, talking, telling dad jokes back and forth, all manner of things. And then also showing him time lapses of those drawings so he can embrace and come to realize the process of rough sketch, pencil art, ink art, colored art. And then, with the understanding that the artwork becomes more refined and there's less editing control as you go along. You can do all that on the front end, not so much on the back end. And so then, in our casual conversations, while I keep recommending we should make a comic, I realized, and we go back and forth on whose idea it was, we realized that we should probably do something smaller to see if we like working with each other, to see how it comes out, to see how practical it is. And
we knew America needed it fast.
Yeah. And so we were like, this is a good one. I interviewed him on my YouTube show about the Economic Bill of Rights that he put together with Alan Minsky for Common Points some time back. And then
for Common Dreams.
Common Dreams. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Yes. commondreams.org. And we're definitely going to do a larger book. Definitely. Because this has been the #1 best comic book collaboration I've ever had. And
Really?
I've had my share of them. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've done historical comics and educational comics. I've art directed and contributed to them. I've had the benefit of working with a wide variety of writers and artists doing all kinds of stuff involved in comics. And this was, without a doubt, an absolute pleasure. You guys want to hear Harvey talk about history, right? Can you imagine like our sessions? Like there's so much stuff that we left out of these pages just because, you know, we had to really like make some smart decisions about what to include and what not to. But I had the benefit of listening to all of it. And so it was like sitting there, like having a one-on-one history class with the man himself, while also getting to, you know, illustrate his work and depict his work in an all new medium.
Yeah, and I want to make a few things clear. First of all, I was thrilled to imagine what I knew getting turned into images. I mean, I thought, wow, this could be great. And he actually sent me some examples of how he would handle particular figures from history, and I showed them to my wife, and we said, wow, this guy's good, and he didn't mind criticism. In fact, I've said to a lot of people, the most amazing thing is this is the most patient guy I've ever met, Matt Strackbein.
You kind of have to be in this game, but yeah, I mean that I'll take that.
I mean, we'll be in the middle of something, and I'll sort of lay out some words, and then I'll say, "Oh fuck, I don't like it. Just get rid of it." and what did he do? He just got rid of it. And then he turned around and he sort of brought me back into it. I mean, it really was a phenomenal collab. Sorry, I'm bragging about us, but it really was a phenomenal collaboration.
Well, I mean, I was bragging about this recently and sitting here saying I don't mean to brag, but on the other hand, this is exactly what we do. Harvey's a historian and I'm a comic book maker. So we knew when we had this completed that we were both going, this is pretty good. This is what we wanted. This is exactly how we wanted this to end up. And
yeah,
so I
Carl
think
Shepard, I just noticed Carl Shepard said, "Did you work with Hyman Minsky, who was the great economist?" This is Hyman Minsky's son I worked with, Alan Minsky, who heads up the organization Progressive Democrats of America, which is not a Democratic Party organization. It stands on its own. He also used to run what's the big progressive radio station out of LA?
There's such a thing.
Pacifica Radio.
Radio? He for many years he was running the, I don't know if he ran both, but he was running the LA part of Pacifica Radio.
Well, I just want you both to know that granted, I just have a bachelor's degree in history, but I also have a degree in journalism. So I was told by my history professors, I write too familiar. But I argue this all the time. Historians should lean into things like podcasts and comic books, because stop writing for other academics. If you want people to know things, get out on the mediums that they're using now.
People knowing things in tenure are not the same.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. Right. So something like this, and I won't lie, like for me, like this is something Jason brought it up. He's like, dude, show it to your daughter. Because my daughter's 15 years old and thinks she knows everything right now. And I have a lot of questions and comments, and don't get me wrong, gentlemen, I do appreciate the work that went into this. I really did enjoy it. But again, I'm a early 40s-year-old leftist who's just like been beaten down by America for so long.
He wanted more blood, is what he's saying. He needed like a Rambo-esque fight on January 6th.
I definitely don't need a Rambo. If you actually watch the first Rambo, that's a man struggling with PTSD, and his old commander goaded him into fighting.
It's called First Blood. Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's not called Rambo. It's called First Blood.
Hey, I had the Southern Dixiecrats like locking arms with the Klan.
Jesus.
And it was very literal, you know what I mean? And Harvey was like, it's too literal. It didn't happen that way. And I was like, it did. And he goes, yeah, but let's just.
Well, factually, many of the Southern Dixiecrats were Klansmen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They took the suit jacket off and then put the big robes on and their pointed hats on.
Or they just walked around with the robe over the suit jacket. They didn't give a damn.
Either or.
Who was going to get mad at him? Some disenfranchised black person?
And this is what I would like to do with a larger narrative is to radicalize people. That's
that's the
one
thing,
of my goals. So,
that's the
but
thing, Letterhack. This is important to me. Like, we need to start getting out like actual history in this kind of format. Do it in a comic book format. Do it in a TikTok. Do it in these things where you could reach young people who in the classroom typically just ignore history. They deal with it because they have to, but like, this is pretty rad, and the thing is, if we don't start reaching out to younger people, especially as a fucking nerd, which I totally am, who reads specifically just history. I'm reading a biography of Eamon de Valera right now. If you don't know who he is, he's the most boring person in Irish history that had a stranglehold on Irish politics for like almost 50 years. It's just, we have to start changing up rather than just presenting, historical texts to people who maybe aren't, interested in reading about it, but in a comic book form, in other things. Like, that's where we need to start getting to. And that's why I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, and it's another reason why we put ourselves in it as meta sort of characters, is because I could literally illustrate one of Harvey's books, but that would be kind of redundant, right? And when you read one of Harvey's books, you're essentially listening to him tell you about these certain points in American history. And so it made sense to have him in there. And somewhere along the line, I think it was his suggestion that I be in there too. And I said, I'll be the sidekick. I'll be the guy learning, and we'll show the reader how we're deciding what to show them from his work in written form to this more written / illustrated form. And in that way, it's more of a conversation and more of a discussion than like a docu comic. Those are great. I love those. I don't know if you guys know Brian Box Brown, his work. Jason, you would like the He-Man effect, how the toy industry sold our childhoods. That's a great docu-comic. But
if you've ever listened to a show with Dan Larson and I, that's the first thing we get into, that we grew up watching 23-minute commercials and loved them.
Yep. There you go. And so, so I did want it to be more accessible. And so I thought if the audience had a relatable character, but also like a visible narrator, someone who was actually there and not hidden, like most narrations are just like, who's saying this? These are just caption boxes. So you can see us relate, and you can see me take things out of context and misunderstand things, and that's okay, right? So also, we took things straight from our conversations that we were having. And sometimes often I would surprise Harvey with that. And when I would turn back in a page with, not finished, but presented, here's what the page will be with the rough sketches. Sometimes he would go, we can't do that. That's too silly. And I'm like, oh, come on, it's great. But, I'll just save it for the book, right? From when we do something bigger. But, I like the idea that we're in the book. A lot of people have done this. Steve Martin recently did it with Harry Bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Griffith of Zippy just did this in a book called Three Rocks, the biography of Ernie Bushmiller, the man who created Nancy, the comic strip. Both of those are fantastic reads, by the way. It's kind of nifty to have the character in there.
I mean, Studs Terkel did it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. If you can be, if
I mean, dude, Letterhack, the what I thought was pretty rad on the first page, it's you and Harvey having a pint talking about it to start. Like, you're getting it spun up. You're like, hey man, what's going on? And then bam, here's Harvey laying it out for all of us. That's really cool. Because like, you don't want just, I mean, Harvey, you can back me up on this. Like, I am,
or not.
I'm sure you've read some English historians, and it's the most dry reading you're ever going to read of all time. And the last thing I'd ever want to see, even in a graphic format, Letterhack, is two English historians talking to each other. But with you and Harvey in the panel, discussing like what was the Economic Bill of Rights, and you take your sip and he launches into it. This is how it started. The same way.
Watch what you say about English historians. My very first book, it's now in its 3rd edition.
Yeah, the British Marcy.
That's awesome.
These guys were radicals, okay? Communists up until 56, and they remained very much on the left ever after.
But that was pretty rad, Letterhack. I thought that was really cool because it was more of a discussion that led into every other panel that followed.
Yeah, and the way that happened was Harvey decided that we got like the page 8 or something, and he said, "Oh, we can't do this. We can't start it this way. We haven't introduced it correctly." And we discussed revising the first page, and I said, "No, don't do that. We can't revise all the pages that we've worked on so far. It's just too much work." And I said, "How about a prologue?" And then he came up with this idea that we were at the bar, and
I came up with the bar. Wait, did I come up with the bar idea or did you?
Yeah. You said, "I see us having a beer."
Okay.
And I said, "My favorite comic strips take place at a bar."
Oh, good. Excellent.
Look at Mac's like, I dig it.
I'm an enjoyer of adult beverages myself.
Then let's just read that. I just to let everybody know where we're going. Let's do that first page.
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Here, let me go back.
Okay. It's very easy to do, is minimal words, but you'll get the idea. Okay. So, okay. But Jason,
I'm quiet.
you have to read you have to read the words in the upper left. Well, yeah, upper left-hand corner.
On
you
the first page.
Introduce us.
A new Bill of Economic Rights. That one?
Well, a new Bill of Rights. Yes, that one. Right.
For the 21st century by Harvey J. Kaye and the Letterhack. Prologue, a comic.
Okay. They just don't get it.
The
Democrats. American democracy has been in crisis for some time, and we may just lose it. The Democrats continue to turn their backs on the answer. We have to go big. As Henry Demarest Lloyd said more than a century ago,
we can save the rights we have inherited from our fathers only by winning new ones to bequeath our children.
We need to secure an economic Bill of Rights.
Well, Harvey, maybe we should make a comic.
And that's how it happened.
Because I say that to everybody. Like, Jason, I probably said that to you at some point. That's my favorite.
And by the way,
line.
if you didn't, he's now insulted.
No, I'm sure I did.
Finally, you know what? I finally got around to doing something on our Patreon page where I want to add artwork.
Where
I start writing these essays, and instead of giving them to different publications that would never pay me, I said, you know what? I'll just do it for the patrons of the show, and if they dig it, then I made a really nice layout for it.
Now, keep in mind, Jason's a phenomenal writer.
Oh,
and phenomenal. He sent me one or two, and I'm like, Jason, you've got spelling errors here. Let's
he's just shitting all over me, just shitting on my good time. He's got some grammatical errors here. I was like, your mom's got grammatical errors.
And but no, like they're very good. And the thing is especially if you are anywhere on the left, no matter where you're at, we have to start getting out there and presenting things in mediums again that they want to see it in.
Right.
Let's stop making 600-page books. We need to knock that shit off. Like, honestly, just please stop. Break it up into smaller chunks so people can digest it easier, and it kind of gets them on the hook. And it leads them into those 600-page books when they need to get to it. And that's Jason,
we've talked about this before. Kuba and I had a long discussion about this when we did the Sublation launch party in New York. We feel like, there was a moment in time where people like Lenin wrote pamphlets.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that was how you got the word out to people. But I think the medium has changed quite a bit. I will say this. when I did this idea to have these essays and make it like a magazine layout, I did it where people can just have a PDF and it's not on the site for them. So if I lose all my money and it goes away tomorrow, then that information goes away tomorrow as well. So you can actually hold, you can print it out if you want to and have it. I'm assuming is the same thing with your guys' comic, or is it just going to be on a site for people to kind of?
Well, you can print. Sorry, you go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, you can print this. We could. Sam Cedar was recommending to us that we make it available as a PDF for people to download and at least have on their own device, or print out. The idea is if we do a book, there's no reason why we couldn't have not like an anthology, but this would be included.
Yeah.
So, comics do that all the time where it's, it's a collection of stories, including this all new story, which is like 200 to 300 pages. And then these shorter ones in the back. So we could totally do that as supplemental material or just additional stories.
There's something about holding an actual book. I mean, because of what I do and I live in Mexico and mail takes forever, I always ask for the PDF so I can just get it quicker.
Speaking of which, Jason, did that book I sent you get to you yet?
Nope.
Of course.
I rely on digital books, comics, especially when I have to. That's for sure. If I don't have time or I just can't, it's not always easy to track down. Yeah, I'll go digital. But I also have a glorious bookshelf that I add to almost daily.
But it's different when you actually have the thing in front of you. There's a very nice person that watches the show. We've kind of become friends. And through this show, guests we've had in book recommendations, they purchased books kind of on accident multiple times. And so I was like, if you don't want that book anymore, just send it to me because I need it for a reference material. Ture Reed's Toward Freedom, Cedric Johnson's from Revolutionaries and Race Leaders. 2 books that I constantly go back to for reference, and to finally have them again, because I've given books away. I think we all probably do that.
Mm-hmm.
You see someone that wants to learn more about this world we exist in, then I'm very quick to give them certain books. And this is something I would definitely love to share with my kids as they have certain questions. And this is something that's not going to really get covered in the average high school level U.S. history course.
And I could back you up on that. I did substitute in high school for American history. And you know how big the New Deal was, Harvey? It was 20 minutes of one lecture. That was it.
Whoa. Wow. And Jason, you can tell them, I know these guys, and point to the characters.
That might be. Yeah, I mean, just so you know, if you go to, for anyone listening, if you go to the Common Dreams, and click on it, and it's 11 pages, you can print page by page, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I don't know because
no.
Letterhack gave me the PDF, so it will look good on the screen.
We'll make it available. I think that makes sense.
Wherever anyone's watching or listening to this show, there's a link to the Common Dreams comic, so you guys can see it for yourself.
Yeah, that'd be great. In fact, I would love to. I mean, I had thought this was my fantasy, and I got brought back to reality by Matt, who told me what the cost would be.
Yeah, right.
Said, maybe we could get this published as this little pamphlet of 12 pages. We could add a page or two like suggested reading at the end or something like that, and then I could take, if we get 500 copies, we could sort of distribute them to people walking into the Democratic Party convention. But I'll just say, this past weekend I spoke at the Progressive. It's called Progressive Central. It was a progressive alternative to what was then coming in the Democratic convention. And it would have been great to just have been able to hand them all out. I did talk about the comic and we projected. In fact, go to page 2 of the comic, Jason, okay?
1 second.
And go down to the bottom so we can show people the bottom right-hand one.
The angry lefty part. There it is.
Yeah, there it is. When I was talking, I had them put that up onto the screen behind me so everyone could see it. Yeah. And it also enabled me to tell everyone where to go. I mean, to go to see the.
Everyone told you
where to go.
That was good timing. You have to admit that was pretty good timing the way I said that, right?
Yeah. But this is the thing: is we ask more than once that the reader ask themselves, why don't we already have these rights? What is so outrageous about these that we should not already have them. And that was something we deliberately repeated in the comic, and that is something that we would want to, that's something we asked ourselves. Harvey and I kept saying, why don't we already have these? This is ridiculous. And I think anyone who reads those rights would have the same thought.
Before you go on, Harvey, I'm going to ask you both, why don't we have these rights?
Well, because
Part 5.
Okay.
Neoliberalism.
Well, for
yes,
start,
absolutely. But I would like to hear both of your.
So FDR during it's 80 years ago this year that FDR pronounced or called for an economic bill of rights and campaigned on it in 44 when he was running once again for president. And it's important to know that the labor movement, unions rallied to the idea of the economic bill of rights. They went on not the warpath, but they campaigned, they invested heavily. They set up programs all across the country to promote the idea of the economic bill of rights. In fact, I'll just give you an idea. This book came out in 1945 or 46, includes all of the pamphlets which were illustrated that the Congress of Industrial Organization put out to push for the economic bill of rights. They called it the People's Program. Okay. So, and then also all the major civil rights organizations, the National Farmers Union, they all got behind it. FDR knew it would be almost impossible to enact because there was a coalition in Congress of conservative Republicans and Southern Democrats to block an economic bill of rights. The Southern Democrats, white working people would have welcomed it. Black working people would have welcomed it. The Southern white Democratic Party folks feared that if it passed, that would bring an end to segregation in the South because it would create a right that would mean all the hospitals had to be desegregated. See? So between the capitalists and the Dixiecrats, it's blocked at that time. But it didn't die as an idea. The Truman administration tried to do something with it. In fact, called for national health care. In the 1950s, by the way, all the way through the 50s, always more than 50% of Americans believe that all Americans should have a right to health care. It's not a new recent kind of thing.
Okay.
In 1960, the Democratic Party platform was literally built and structured in terms of the Economic Bill of Rights. The only question they had in their minds, the guys who wrote it, was would Kennedy endorse it or embrace it because he was not a liberal?
Yeah.
Then Johnson basically signs into law civil rights, voting rights, Medicare, Medicaid, whole series of environmental laws, educational initiatives. I mean, it's coming back, so to speak. A. Philip Randolph, the great labor and civil rights leader, issued in 1966 a call for a freedom budget to basically to achieve freedom from want. 150 of the foremost academic leaders, foundation leaders, religious leaders, and union leaders endorsed it. It was a extremely popular idea, and it probably would have worked in the course of maybe 10 years to end poverty and rebuild America. Then in 1968, not long before he was assassinated, Martin Luther King echoed FDR and called for an economic bill of rights. Well, what happens? In the early 1970s, the corporate bosses, just as they had in other times of reaction, they declared war on working people. Just declared war on working people. It took the form of the Powell Memorandum, and that same guy who wrote it, Lewis Powell, it was a memorandum to the Chamber of Commerce. 2 weeks later, Nixon nominated him to the Supreme Court. Okay?
Of course.
The Trilateral Commission, which was no conspiracy theory, it was an open organization of politicians and business people, basically, who said, look, we have a crisis of democracy. And what was the crisis? As far as they were concerned, it was too much democracy. And they issued a report. As long as we're on video, let me see. I'll show you the report. NYU Press published it. It was no underground kind of thing. It was wide open. Everyone knew what was happening. And in this, they called basically for tamping down of democracy, and they named the problems. They named the people. They said it's public employee unions, the big civil rights and poor people's movement, the women's movement, students and academics and journalists. That's the problem, they said. And what ensues? Well, Carter administration was an utter failure. In fact, the Carter administration paved the way for the Reagan administration. Carter basically did not pursue labor law reform that was on the books. They didn't pursue the environmental movement's demands. He turned his back on the entire, if you like, progressive left.
But he built all those houses.
Now that's later. That's later. That was when he was redeeming himself in the public mind. Mm-hmm. And then Reagan comes in, and then forget Economic Bill of Rights, whatever. You don't hear about the Economic Bill of Rights again until Bernie Sanders talks about it in 2016, and then talks about it all the more in 2020. There you go. But you know what? To this day, Americans want an Economic Bill of Rights. We actually had polling done by Data for Progress, and it showed that like 69% of Americans wanted an Economic Bill of Rights laid out.
What say you now, Mac, Mr. Question Asker?
Well, this is what I thought was interesting, and you can ask Jason. I texted him towards the end of reading it. I really lost faith in Bernie Sanders when he rolled over for Clinton in 2016. I felt that was an act of cowardice. I don't understand how a man that moved so many young people to get involved in a political system that is actively working against them could bow out and show his belly to someone who is the epitome of a Democrat, an established Democrat. So I after
Let me respond.
Please, Harvey, please.
And I'm not going to respond in his defense. Okay, I'm going to actually take your argument a step further. Okay, in 2016, it was prearranged for Hillary, and the party had basically set it up so that Bernie would have had to literally romp in the primaries. Mm-hmm. Undeniably, there were places in which he did. The South and Clyburn became the leader of those forces, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, and this goes for both 2016, 2020, so I'm going to come back to 16. In 2020, it was his to win. He didn't do what he needed to do in the course of the debates, and I'll explain to you what I mean. In 2016, he talked about, in October of 2016, he went to Georgetown University and actually talked about what it meant to be a democratic socialist, and he referred to both FDR and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, FDR would never have called himself a democratic socialist. He wouldn't even use the term social democrat, but there were reasons he didn't.
Yeah.
He used the term liberalism and militant liberalism, and if you look closely, there's very little distinction between them. Okay, he couldn't use the term social democracy because he was being accused of being a communist over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, especially in the 30s and 40s, that was not something you wanted to be associated with.
So what happened when he went out of the campaign trail? He didn't stick to the question of the FDR New Deal and the possible Economic Bill of Rights. He started talking about Northern Europe over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, no Americans are going to be excited being told, "Hey, you're not as good as the Europeans." Because keep in mind, there were generations who had to fucking fight in Europe to rescue the Europeans. Number one, okay. But the other thing is this: that did you ever see the film by Michael Moore, Where to Invade Next?
Yes.
People walked out of that movie and they thought, "Wow, why can't we do those things?" Well, that wasn't the point of Michael Moore's film. The point of Michael Moore's film was to say, hey, all these ideas, just as these Europeans noted, originated with us and then were enacted over there. Okay, so the place to invade is here. Actually, would have been the answer to the question. Okay. Now let me come back to this. Hillary nailed him in the debate in the 2016. We're not Denmark.
Yeah.
That's what she said. And by the way, that literally deflated him.
Yeah.
Okay. But even worse, in 2020, when he really was likely the front runner. I mean, he was the front runner. Buttigieg, had a brief moment in Iowa. Elizabeth Warren went nowhere. Kamala Harris went absolutely nowhere. And not only went nowhere, she actually retreated from Medicare for All and some other things. Biden was a dud.
Yep.
Okay, a dud. So what does he do? He goes into the debates with that group of Democrats, and I can't remember which one of them said to him, "Oh, Medicare for All, you want to bankrupt America." Now, that was the moment for Bernie to take the lead and walk away from that debate having crushed them. All he had to do was say, just like you brought up Debs earlier, all he had to do was do what Debs did. When Debs defended himself in the courthouse in 1918 against charges of sedition, although he was convicted and sent to prison, the point was his defense was he brought into the courtroom Thomas Paine, Abraham Lincoln. He brought in the great dissenters because Lincoln had opposed the war against Mexico at the time. But what did he do? Nothing. He did nothing, right? Well, then similarly, in that big final debate with Biden, and everyone, by the way, Brianna Joy Gray built it up as this is going to be the time where Bernie's going to bring the whole FDR thing to bear. How do we know that? Because the night before the debate, they did a YouTube fireside chat. Bernie talking to people in a fireside chat. That's a direct reference to the FDR fireside chats of the 30s and 40s. But even more, she did a 1-hour YouTube thing before the debate. And I believe she actually said, by the way, I did a video with Brianna Joy Gray for Bernie on FDR and the Economic Bill of Rights. I figured he's going to have to push this stuff in these debates. He never mentioned it in any of the debates. And that night against Biden, what did he do? First of all, he didn't go for the jugular, but he didn't have to go for the jugular in the jugular sense. He could have just said, everybody says I'm not really a Democrat. You Democrats have rejected the greatest Democratic Party president ever, maybe the greatest president after Lincoln, maybe even as great as Lincoln, FDR. And what did FDR want to do? When he pushed Social Security, his original plan was to have healthcare, universal healthcare. I mean, he had the opportunity. So I'm with you. I to this day, look, I still love Bernie for what he brought to bear, what he brought into being in this country. But the fact is, he failed to create a narrative. He failed to create a vision for young people that would have enabled them to know that what we want is solidly American. And all those folks who want to deny it is solidly un-American and anti-American, and fuck them.
See, I catch heat for this, but I think once you become a politician, an elected official in our government, you're at least systemically part of the problem. I can't trust you anymore on a certain level. Sorry, you're the one who decided to get into politics. I'm just a citizen. But and that's why I was really happy that Harvey and I, and this is Harvey's thing, but we're on the same page, and I'm just sort of like along for the ride here for in a certain way. But like at the end of the comic, we leave it with the resurgent labor movement and unions and those folks to pick up where Congress has dropped the ball on these rights and policy. I'm talking about healthcare and wages and all that stuff. Labor can deliver still. There's still an opportunity there. And so in my mind, I'm just like one of these, why are we voting? Who are we voting for? Is anything really I always ask this kind of exaggerating question, like if Trump wins, are we doomed? If if Harris wins, I was saying Biden, but now if Harris wins, does anything really change? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how significant a change can we even expect? And so I think, like, if we rely less on politicians to be our heroes and lead our movements, then maybe we can end up choosing maybe the leader of the movement comes out of the movement versus the movement springing up around them. Like,
Yeah,
do we need a politician to lead the movement?
I would argue like Sean Fain, and
that's
Jason,
what I'm saying.
Please
Yeah.
pop in on this.
Mhm.
He's the guy that popped in out of the movement.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I'm not happy he was at the Democrat
RNC.
convention. I'm
Or
not
the
happy
DNC.
about that.
Who was at the RNC?
No, that was
the Teamsters.
No, listen,
that was a
Mac,
Teamsters
Mac,
twat.
You're both my brother Matt and my new friend Mac. You got to think about this for a minute.
Help me.
Okay. So, do you know? Look, my friend Sarah Nelson, the head of the airline flight attendants. We've had this conversation for a few years, and we both
is
agreed.
Rad as shit. She is cool as
She's
shit.
in the comic.
So yeah, she's in the. Sarah and I have been friends and we have done a lot of talking about this. And the idea is that no, you can't depend right now on the politicians.
Yeah.
The labor movement is resurgent, fortunately, but it's not resurgent enough. Listen to what I'm saying.
I agree with you.
So let me first say that, and by the way, somebody always says, what inside strategy or outside strategy? Whatever the labor movement does must ultimately be translated into law.
Yes.
Okay. So you got to have the folks in there. You got to have the better than the worse folks. Okay. But here's the other thing. Look, Sean Fain did a decent job at the Democratic convention the other night, but I'm pissed off still because I'm a labor unionist. I've been a labor unionist for many years. I believe that the labor union leadership right now has to come out and remember that they represent both their union members and the working class.
Yes,
and
thank you.
And as a consequence, it's time for labor to advance the vision. Look, as we explain in the comic book, and I explain in my articles, FDR and labor worked closely on many things, okay? They fought as well. They worked closely. When he called for an economic bill of rights, they rallied and campaigned for it.
Yes.
So as we say here, we don't have an FDR today. Thus, it's up to labor to take the lead.
Yeah,
and make the likes of Harris and Walz and the others.
That's what kind of killed me, Harvey, when I kept seeing Biden compared as the most labor-friendly president since FDR.
Well,
my whole thing is
wait, I'm with you.
Buried the bar. You buried it in the ground. It's not that hard when you've done nothing. Both parties.
Well, the railroad breaking the strike.
Breaking the strike. How about look, the other night in the convention, Chris Coons spoke before Biden. The senator from Delaware. Chris Coons was a mentee. In other words, Biden mentored him into the Senate.
Oh wow.
You will recall that Bernie has the first thing Bernie wanted to do as chair of the now the new chair, when he became chair of the Budget Committee, he wanted to put into the American Rescue Plan a $15 an hour minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
Who blocked it? Everyone says Manchin and Sinema. Chris Coons voted against it. 2 senators from Delaware. The senator, what's her name, from up in New Hampshire, the woman who used to be governor of the state, I believe. She voted against it. 8 Democrats voted against it. Okay? So it didn't happen. So, we got to have people in there. But it's also the case, labor has got to labor can't say, we back Harris and say, 3 cheers, it'll be great. We all know that if Trump and the Republicans win, it's the end of labor law. They will literally they will turn the whole country into a right to work country.
Mm-hmm.
They're on their way.
They're on their way. Exactly. I'm not telling you Democrats are the heroes for labor. What I'm telling you is labor, the likes of Sean Fain and the president of the Teamsters, who should know better than to have gone to speak at the Republican convention and kiss Trump's ass. Okay. The fact is, these folks have to come forward in unity and say, we stand for what the labor movement at its best and its greatest stands for. economic rights for all working Americans, for all Americans. Okay, you don't have to even if you're not working, these are rights you should have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and see that's the thing that's why I appreciate Christian Smalls when he went in front of Congress. Like, he's the least likely dude you think would be in charge of a labor union. He rolled up in that flat-billed Yankees cap,
Right.
you know, just
Yeah, I don't hold that against him.
cool as shit. Oh, hell no, Harvey.
But the thing about
But that man said, I don't just argue for people who have the same political beliefs as me. I argue and fight for labor.
I mean, he's a complicated figure, and I wouldn't hold him up as someone.
Chris, absolutely. Don't forget, he lined up with this. He lined up right now. I mean, I understood why he did it, because the Teamsters want to organize the Amazon drivers, and the idea is to strengthen, the Amazon union as much as you can, going up against Amazon. But it's also the case, and I don't know, I wonder how he felt when the Teamsters president, who he just literally signed an agreement with, then went to the Republicans, and as I said, kissed Trump's ass and Vance's ass and so on.
Yeah, but Jason, I'm not saying he's not problematic. The fact of the matter is this: we live in the United States where labor's been so crushed for so long. Anybody that pipes up and can get a union started at Amazon, I'm gonna have a little bit.
But there's not a union started at Amazon across the board.
No, and that's the thing.
And hold on, let me finish. And there's like two factions within that.
Yeah.
So he's soaked up all the attention, and and a lot of people that don't follow that think that that's the union to follow. So it's a question of, they made that mistake and when that conversation got leaked, but maybe the greatest trick they ever did was, we'll just let you be a star.
I mean, yeah, that could very well be.
You know what? If you, I'll tell you what they pulled off in that warehouse is great. The union that really impresses me, at the grassroots, was the Starbucks union.
Yes.
Do you know how impossible it is to organize in a situation like that? Number one, and number two, on the scale. I mean, look, it's incredibly huge, the Starbucks empire, but they pulled off miracles along the way, over and over and over again. And but it's also the case. Here's what I mean: the labor movement leadership, the AFL-CIO, is a tragedy. What's gone on? Okay, I was working very hard for Sarah Nelson to become the president. We had a campaign going. We started out rather stealthily, and then we went open, but we couldn't pull it off. But it's the case that labor itself has to start taking the lead. So you've got to get these big unions like the UAW and, yes, the Teamsters and a whole host of others to come together and pronounce the vision. So, and that's what we call for at the end of the comic. And by the way, go to the last page so that image can,
Bam.
I was really happy we ended there, because at some point I was like, okay, Harvey, you're driving this thing. Tell me where we ended.
Letterhack's like, Harvey, I need you to stop throwing stuff at me. I only have so many pages right now.
No, but it was like we could end it here. We could end it after this. But
by the way, you see that picture of Nina, myself, and Marianne Williamson, that panel? You know what that's about?
Harvey's involved.
Okay, I was
one Harvey. I love
Jason.
I'm from Northeast Ohio, and it killed me that the Democratic Party in Cleveland worked so hard to make sure Nina did not get elected.
Okay, Matt. So you will admire me more now, because I was Nina's primary advisor.
Well, Harvey, I just want you to know.
So it's your fault.
I know who you are.
No, he got defeated too.
And I'm going to tell you right now.
She she made the Economic Bill of Rights the centerpiece of her campaign. Yeah. And if the billions hadn't been poured in, millions by the billionaires.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, 2 times in a row, she was the favorite. And then all of a sudden it's like,
oh, dude.
Right?
And especially the stooge they threw out to run against her. She's done nothing for Cuyahoga County or Cleveland City. She's done nothing.
Yeah.
Right. and that's the shitty thing. Nina Turner actually gives a shit.
Yeah, no, I sent a note to Nina. I sent a note to Nina. I said I was going on this podcast tonight. This is revolution. So it meant that they were rescuing me from having to watch tonight's convention.
Did she say she knew who we were? She's like, I have no idea who those people are.
Have you had her on?
No.
No, we would love to though, because I'm a Nina fanboy, is what I am.
I can't promise, but we'll see. But then I also was the primary advisor for Marianne Williamson in her ill-fated campaign. She embraced the Economic Bill of Rights and wanted me on as the advisor.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Harvey, it's not ill-fated, because this country has actively worked to make sure that there's only two parties, and I've said this. Matt,
this is important. Pretend you're in one of my classes.
Yes, sir.
Okay? I would say to you, you know what? I know exactly what you're saying, but if you want to be more effective, when you say, don't say this country has, say the corporate elite has. Keep in mind, 70% of Americans, without even knowing anything about it, want the Economic Bill of Rights. So it isn't that this country has done the suppression of it. It's that the corporate elites and the media. I mean, it's not a grassroots thing. It's top down.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but for me, I see how, especially with me being in the military as long as I was, I see people who came from tiny towns where there was nothing, like NAFTA,
yeah, sure.
and Reagan's initial deregulation of banks in the mid 80s. Led to horrible, economic
SNL scandals
issues. Yes.
Yeah.
It all begins with Carter, though. Remember that.
Yes, absolutely, Harvey. But I see these people that just continue to vote for Republicans because they're good for the military, right?
Well, okay. Now that's another story which I'll give you. Keep in mind, the southern part of the United States was basically feudal, okay, and remained a one-party dictatorship of white supremacists right through the 30s and the 40s into the 50s, and then it's smashed in part in the 60s.
Yes, sir.
Now, okay, so here's the thing. It wasn't just that it was feudal and it was racist. It was literally backward economically. And so the way in which the South was sustained at all was you sent your military bases. That's where the military bases were. That's how you gave welfare to the South. Because you didn't until FDR, there was no welfare program.
Yeah. I mean, and on top of that, honestly, when you get down to the why, especially in Fayetteville, Harvey, where the former Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty stands, it was warm. And it allowed them to train outdoors for 9 months a year.
Sorry, this is to break a little bit, but I know this history that I want to tell you in relation to what you're saying. When they started actually drafting African Americans in World War II, they actually sent them to the South to train at Southern bases.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right? You gotta wonder, right?
Well, Harvey.
But here's the weird. But wait, this is the weird part. When there was the Japanese American combat.
Oh, the Nisei, yeah,
right. The 442.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. 442.
My dad, one of my dearest friends who passed away several years ago from cancer. His father was he's Japanese American. He was born in a camp while his father was in the military.
Wow.
Do you know when they sent those guys to, I think it was Alabama, to train? It was so weird. These Southern racists didn't mind their daughters holding dances for the Japanese Americans, who so much of the country hated because they blamed all the Japanese for labor. I mean, the contradictions were phenomenal. Or how about this? In Texas, Mexicans were segregated quite often from the public schools and pushed aside like African Americans were throughout the South, and yet they came into the 400,000 Mexican Americans served in the military. They were never segregated in the military.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing.
So I mean, the contradictions in this country are tragic and brutal, and everything else. And
what I was trying to get to like kind of feed into your point is you had the triple nickel, the 555. all-black airborne unit that tested the initial parachutes and were part of the Normandy invasion, right?
Well, they didn't parachute in; they were in supply divisions.
No, 555 was an infantry unit.
Oh, they were an infantry unit.
Yes,
because I thought you were talking about this other. Wait, there was another. I thought it was the 555 that actually were sent out. This is the irony of history too. You know, the Japanese had these incendiary balloons that they would send up over, and they would land in Washington State and Oregon, and they would to set forest fires. That was the idea. The black paratrooper units were sent to the Northwest to combat the fires. And these guys kept saying, they're not letting us fight the war. But little did they realize they were fighting the war.
Yeah. Okay? I mean, that was the first part, but the triple nickel tested the parachutes.
That's interesting. Triple nickel. I hadn't heard of that. Yeah. I never heard that expression. That's interesting.
And what was great is their unit patch, believe it or not, back in 44, Jason, you'll love this, is a giant Black Panther over 3 5s.
Well, what did there was the tank division. There was the tank units too, and didn't they have the Panther as well?
They did, but
my uncle, by the way, was a captain of an all-black company, World War II supply company.
I was an infantry guy, so if you talk to me about tanks, I have no idea what you're talking about.
My father was in the tanks. My uncle used to say, he used to hear these things. Oh, you know, blacks only served in supply companies. He used to say, "This is bullshit."
Yeah,
our supply companies arrived in front of the combat troops to where we were supposed to be. We had to wait for those guys to show up so we could supply them. We were having to fight before they even got there.
Yeah. I mean, dude, Harvey, it's not that different. I went to Afghanistan 3 times, Iraq, and Bosnia once.
Did you really?
And it was the same shit. And keep in mind, we've been in Afghanistan for forever at that point. But you know, it does feed into it. Like we had this weird relationship with, you know, the diverse population that was fighting in this country, you know, during World War II. You know, my kids are indigenous, so they're learning about like code talkers and what the indigenous population added to, you know, the war effort and, you know, how indigenous relations fed into it. And my daughter, you know, she is, you know, she's 15, so she thinks she knows everything. But she's very...
She does. Don't forget that. She does.
Yeah. You know, but she's very interested in indigenous history, and she's very involved in her tribe, to where I watch a 15-year-old girl on Saturdays sit in general council meetings talking about, you know, the tribal president.
Oh, wow.
You know, so it's you know, I'm happy, but
you must be very proud of her.
I am, but Jason brought up a good point with her. Because we were texting before the show. You know, she is 15 and thinks she knows everything. But I'm going to send her your link so she knows some other things, you know, about what happened in, you know, the early prior World War I or World War II into actually the conflict that FDR did. But like, here's my big question for you and Letterhack. Okay. Is that we are on this precipice where organized labor has a bigger footing now.
It's still re-emerging.
Yeah. We're still not, we don't, you know, we're still at what, like 30%, Harvey? You know,
no, like, God, if we were there, that'd be great. No, it's
6% like private sector.
6%.
10%
okay,
overall. Well, that's only because of public.
I apologize, guys.
Yeah. At its highest, which was in 1955, it was 35%.
Okay, so we're at 6% now, and we have some big unions, like you said. We have the Starbucks workers, and right or wrong, you know, Christopher Smalls has brought out the Amazon workers that are aligning with the Teamsters. We have smaller, you know, unions that are popping up.
Right.
So, based on that last page that you showed us, what do you guys think that we need to do to keep that ball rolling, to get more people to get involved in trying to unionize, knowing that full well the laws in this country are arrayed against labor and not for labor.
By the way, especially, but not only in the South.
Well, I live in North Carolina, Harvey, and I worked at a company called Father Jonathan's, if you get my meaning. And I tried organizing, and I had union cards through IWW on a Monday, and by Tuesday they fired half the staff and assigned a quarter of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
What I want to do all the time and more, and what I push myself to do is talk to people who don't do these podcasts. I want to talk to who we call normies, and I want to talk to them, and more than I want to talk to people on my own show, my own viewers, right? My own audience. And I want to convince them that they may think they're comfortable at their job because they have benefits there, but they are not actually comfortable because that job is garbage. And the fact that they're too scared to leave or to say anything because they might risk their health care is bullshit. And that they need to be upset about that. And they need to be, and look, even in the South, you have the Union of Southern Service Workers, right? These people are trying to unionize Waffle House. Let's go, right?
Yes.
Like all
and
these people
do not fuck with Waffle House.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's like the perfect place to start in the South, and then go to the dollar stores, right? And now you've done it basically. So I think that it makes, to me, I've always been like telling people like, oh, you got to register to vote and be sure to vote in the primaries. What are primaries? Oh, let me explain it. And now I'm just like, no, you need to be upset and stop thinking that you're comfortable because you know you're not.
Well, that's a
and
hard
they're tricking
thing
you into it.
I
I know it's really difficult.
I would. That's a hard thing to say, and it has to come from a place of a certain amount of comfort. Because if I don't have health care.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a doctor 20 years. Luckily, I live somewhere where dental care is really inexpensive. If I wanted a fake butt, I could get it pretty cheap here. But the reality is, more people work multiple jobs that pay really crap wages, and you saw it with Uber and Lyft.
Yeah.
And this is where I always ask questions to people about strategy. All it took to really crush Amazon's attempt to get into the South with the labor union, you make more money.
Yeah.
I don't shut up about your union. I don't care. I make more money here. I probably don't have a college degree. I might not even have a high school degree. I may have felonies. So where the fuck am I going to work other than here
at the White House?
Money?
Right. No, you're right. But Jason, you're totally right, man. And this is why I say, like, those conversations, although I personally love having them with people, and I love like just trying to shift their way of thinking, that's totally not the answer, right? You can't just say no, risk it all. That's, for me, that's a necessary thing that I like. That's my street advocacy, right? That's my street level advocacy. I need to be doing that all the time, right?
Yeah.
The rest of the time, all the energy we put into supporting one politician on Twitter or one politician in the primary, we need to shift all of that over to, and again, do what you want, but I say we shift all of that over to organized labor. I think if we support them, then that gives these people that I'm having conversations with more of an opportunity to, segue.
Kind of the greatest thing about neoliberalism is it really does create an us and them mentality.
Yes.
And that took a long time for that to happen.
It's real. Like, look, I spent
neoliberalism goes right back to the 70s. We're talking 50 years.
50-year counter revolution, as we say on this show.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I sadly feel like, and I don't say this with any sort of pride. I fight with this feeling, right? Because we all want to be hopeful, right? I'm a father. I'm supposed to be hopeful.
Wait, Jason, you're hopeful?
I try to be.
Well, he says he wants.
I try to be. Right? I fight with it.
I'm like that meme, Jason, where it's like you get this. Wait, you get paid?
Yeah. but I spent 5 minutes, doing contract work in the tech world in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm from. And one thing that was interesting to me was a lack of comfort people had. So to your point, Letterhack, I worked with people that made close to 6 figures, if not 6 figures, but still had roommates.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because they want to have roommates, but because you need to have roommates when you have a $4,500 apartment or a $5,000 apartment or $6,000 apartment. Now, granted, those rents have gone down since the shelter in place and the height of the COVID pandemic, but it hasn't gone down that much.
Yeah.
And
I don't think it's gone down in New York.
But my point is, even though these people faced similar problems to their brethren that drove Uber and Lyft, they were kind of victims of being a part of this system where I can't get around using these apps, and I only see the world through the black mirror of my phone, and I don't really care that much about politics. Most people are apolitical.
Oh, yes.
They are apolitical, but they have needs and wants and yearnings that are not articulated, and that's the role. That's the role of a good politician. By the way, to give you some hope, or at least to tell you why there's might be reason to hope in these terms. I had a cohort of students who graduated, I think it's about 8 years ago.
Okay.
And
2016.
I stay in touch with them daily. We have this little texting group, we do a whole bunch of stuff. Mondays, we share music. I mean, it goes on all the time. One of those students, young woman, we helped set her into a job as a union organizer. She got a job with the National Nurses Union.
Oh, awesome.
She is batting 1,000 as an organizer.
Fuck yes.
1,000. She's organized in California. She's organized in Iowa. She's been in numerous states around the country, and she's batting 1,000. And it's not that she's great. She's fabulous. But the yearning, the desire to be organized so that they can't look, it of course, one organizes because one needs certain things, but organizing also provides dignity. Solidarity leads to dignity, I think. And I think people yearn for that. And the question is, will all of the unions take the lesson from, say, the nurses union and others and do a more deliberate job of organizing? It's tough to organize in a place unless you've got the ally outside the place. So, as you discovered, the Wobblies can only do so much.
Like a lot of the unions that we're seeing form in places like, let's say, Google or even Starbucks, for example.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody on the screen has ever worked at a Starbucks. I have. I know people that got sabbatical from Starbucks way before they had union. I know people that retired from Starbucks way before they had a union. Those are places, I don't want to say they're easy because they definitely closed some stores and were difficult, but there's a massive difference between the acceptance of Starbucks unions, because Starbucks hasn't been complaining about profits being down, right?
No, right.
I always looked at this as the greatest marketing push that they never had to pay for. Keep in mind,
Jason, when were you working for Starbucks? When did you have that job?
2008, 2009.
Yeah. Once upon a time, and maybe you remember, Howard Schultz, that's the name, Schultz, was it?
Yeah.
Howard Schultz was considered. Well, he was considered the model corporate leader.
Yes. That's why I worked there. Yeah.
Because if there were possibilities for healthcare benefits,
help with your college tuition,
tuition,
worked around your schedule.
Right.
And as a veteran, you know what they used to offer?
What was that?
Veterans and spouses of veterans starting jobs at $20 an hour.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
It was a job. You know why I quit Starbucks? Olympia Dukakis.
What?
Olympia, the actress.
Was she mean to you when she came in to buy coffee?
No, she was actually quite nice, and we became friends. She was working on a play at the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, and she used to always talk to me every day. I'd see her walking around in the city, and we'd strike up conversation. And one day she went up to me. She goes, "You don't look happy here." I said, "I'm not." She goes, "You're an artist, aren't you?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "You should quit this job and just do your thing." I swear to God. I swear to God.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Swear to
Wow.
God. Yeah. But
Transformational.
yeah.
Jason, you don't look happy. You should go get a job at Starbucks. You should go
Don't
get a
do
job
it.
at Starbucks.
I'm
You'll be
not.
happy.
I'm not. Yeah.
Harvey,
Won't do
don't
it.
say that because I'm tied to him on Wednesdays.
I did have to do a stream from a Starbucks reluctantly in the Central Valley of California as I was driving up north to see my family, and I was shocked at how, I don't want to say bad, but this service. I was like, man, this place sure did run better when you guys organized. They got to have breaks.
I'm going to forget you said that.
You know what, Harvey? I'm going to too. I'm going to ignore this tonight.
I was this close to yelling out, "Oh, this is what you get with the union, huh?"
No, I mean, I remember. It really astounds me how I couldn't believe it was Howard Schultz who became the poster child for the anti-union initiative,
which is so funny. But again, if you, and I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I did. How can I say this without giving out too much information? I did get through touring. I did get to know a family that were higher up with, the dad was a higher up in a company that dealt with Starbucks. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And for years, because of their growth, they had been planning on cutting stores left and right. Because if you guys remember, there would be a Starbucks across the street from the Starbucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember when they did. I remember when they did actually have a wave of closures.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a wave of openings.
But yeah, it's a. I remember talking to him. This is 2014, 15. He's like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh," I was reading the paper about some closures, and he was like, "Oh, well, they're doing that because they expanded so quickly that there's this stupid thing where there'll be like a Starbucks inside of a store next door to a Starbucks."
Yeah.
Yeah. And that still exists in Green Bay, by the way. So,
Well, the crazy thing is, Harvey, I work for a Chevy dealership right now. And the truckers who bring new vehicles on the lot are union.
yeah.
Chevy's a UAW place.
Right.
At the dealership, you don't utter the word union.
Really?
No.
So that. Oh, well, because the truckers are operating on a national. I see what they did. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not national because my truckers work South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia.
No, but who's the trucking company? Do you know?
I do know.
The point is, those truckers are negotiating with Chevy, with General Motors.
Yeah.
They're not dealing with the guy who owns the Chevy dealer.
Yeah. But so what I'm making now is better than what I was making delivering for Father Jonathan's, right?
What was Father Jonathan's? Tell me.
I'm going to write it in the private chat.
He'll put it in the chat, Harvey, okay?
Oh, God. Was it a whorehouse?
No.
He wishes. He wishes.
I do, actually.
You would have stayed.
I thought you were delivering women.
He would have stayed with that job.
Oh, fuck yeah. But the thing is, it's like my pay is better. But my grandfather used to produce steel that went directly to GM and made vehicles. And my grandmother made...
Okay, now I see who it is. Okay.
Yeah. My grandmother made electrical components for Chevy, And I grew up in a union household. Like, straight union household, and my mother thinks unions are the worst thing on the planet. And I'm like, you literally had the benefit.
That's amazing.
Of living in a union household.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, it's a non-union environment, and I talk about this all the time because I worked in one, is the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah. Most of those companies aren't union, and it's a very dangerous place to work. But when we talk about union labor organizing, we talk about the South, once again, it boils down to, well, I can make more money.
Yeah.
And I'm not really going to complain. And this person's a troublemaker. And especially when agitation comes from outside.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really easy to point at a Yankee.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, after World War II, the CIO and the AFL, but especially the CIO, decided it was going to organize the South. was called Operation Dixie,
Mhm.
and they invested pretty heavily, but they could not crack the South. And this especially once Taft-Hartley came into being and basically outlawed the closed shop. But quite often the organizers were Jewish guys from up north who were coming in, were coming down, and the question was, do you organize, since these plants were often segregated, do you organize the white guys or do you organize the black guys? And when the Jews came, the old story, the Jews are organizing the blacks, and the whole thing just ran out of steam and ran out of dollars.
Because also you have to keep in mind, it's like we forget or we just don't know. Let's just say we just don't know. I'd rather not say we forget. We just don't know who did and didn't get those benefits. And it wasn't just all black people. It was also tons of white people that didn't.
No, exactly. I bet most people don't realize that more whites were disfranchised by poll taxes and literacy requirements in numbers, not percentages. The percentage of the black population versus, but more whites were disfranchised as a consequence of those things in pure numbers.
So when we talk about like black people losing farmland, white people lost farmland as well.
Yeah, sharecroppers are white and black.
Yeah, so it's when you think about organizing in these places, when you come from the outside, you are the person that's been talked about probably for multiple generations that disenfranchised the family. We didn't get no Social Security. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a difficult task. I'm not saying it's an easy task, but I remember someone fell and they hurt themselves. You fall. It's an oil rig. It's slippery. And I was like, oh man, you should go see a doctor. And he goes to me, shh. I was like, what do you mean shush? He goes, if they know I'm hurt, they're going to send me home and I need this money.
Oh yeah. Jesus.
That's a reality that is very frightening.
Well, isn't this
hold on, I'm sorry. I just have to tell you that I've got like 5, no more than 10 minutes.
We're gonna be going for 2 hours. So we got
also because I could keep going with you guys all night, but you may recall, Jason, that this is not only the work area. This is where we sleep, and my wife goes to bed.
I keep slipping into I'm just watching the show, and I'm like, oh, I should probably be saying something.
Well, okay,
this is like me watching the show. Is just this.
Before we go, to bring my partner into this, I do want to show everyone the second to last page of the comic. The penultimate page.
Bam.
That's the last page, and then the one before that.
Oh, sorry. So
with
9?
the rights, the
rights. Okay, the rights. Yeah,
phenomenal page, by the way.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
This was great because this actually is one of the funniest moments. Not for what we say, but the question was, how would we display these, right? And so if you look at the prior,
like visually,
if you go up to the top of there,
I like how it says, these are drapes, and Letterhack goes, no, they're pointed at the end.
They've got points.
It's like I said, draw banners, not curtains, and I'm like, nah, these got the point.
Yeah, because I think we actually had a conversation. I think I said, let's get them on, get it all on a banner or something like that.
And then I'm criticizing myself because I kept drawing them. I'm like, these look like curtains. This is killing me. And I was like, oh, I'll make them pointy. And so then I just worked that in.
So I just want to read this aloud. I want people to hear these 10. Okay.
Yes.
And you want to alternate the four of us. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go Harvey. We'll go Harvey, Letterhack, Mac, me.
Okay. Harvey. Okay. 1, a useful job that pays a living wage.
2, a voice in the workplace through a union and collective bargaining.
Comprehensive quality healthcare.
4, complete cost-free public education and access to broadband internet.
5, decent, safe, affordable housing.
6, a clean environment and a healthy planet.
7, a meaningful environment.
Endowment.
Endowment of resources. Sorry, guys.
You're drunk.
At birth and secure retirement. I'm not drunk. That's the thing. I close it on my big screen.
Just so you know, the meaningful endowment is essentially not unlike the idea of baby bonds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 8. No, I'm not 8.
I'm 8.
You're 8.
Sound banking and financial services.
9, an equitable and economically fair justice system.
10, recreation and participation in civic and democratic life.
So those are the 10 rights. And if we go back to that page 2, okay, go back to the page 2.
Okay.
At the bottom,
That picture, that bottom right-hand corner of that page.
angry
2,
lefty alert.
right there.
That's right.
Or it's not we. Why the fuck don't we have these rights already?
Well, the thing is, Harvey, Jason and I argue this all the time.
Mhm.
Sports is a great organizing tool.
Yes.
Why aren't we doing this more?
That's a good point. That is a really good point about
Be in the
sports.
community, organizing the community, leftist, communist, socialist bowling leagues.
Yeah,
Soccer,
you know,
football,
absolutely.
basketball.
Yeah.
By the way, sports teams are look, in the absence of a mass draft, okay, we need situations that afford young people the experience of solidarity. Sports teams are exactly that.
Jason, of course, Harvey says it better than we did.
Right. Thomas Sankara said the same thing. Look, it's late and you guys are all on different time zones than me. I'm still here on the beautiful Pacific time zone out here in Baja. Wherever you guys are
You're in
watching.
Baja. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've
Oh,
never
yes.
been, but
It's
well,
gorgeous.
good. I'm glad
I'll
you
send
are
you some-
there.
I'll send you some photos of how gorgeous it was.
Oh, we should just come visit and take selfies. What are you talking?
You can.
Yeah.
Hotels are cheap,
Letterhack,
you don't
I'm
spend
I'm
much.
already working on it. I'm getting my new passport.
We'll do a
so I can
comic
get
book.
out there.
Oh,
The
okay.
4 of us in Baja.
You know, Ben Burgess is my neighbor, right, Harvey?
Oh, of course. I did.
Imagine that cookout.
Yeah.
Come on.
Fantastic.
Ben
That's
is
great.
a 2-minute walk. So wherever you guys are watching, listening to the show, the link to the comic, The Economic Bill of Rights for the 21st Century, is right there for you to click before we even get into the description of the show. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Letterhack. I hope to have you guys back on again.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
We're gonna go to work and produce more things for you to have us on to talk about.
Yes.
No problem.
Let's do this.
No
Okay,
problem.
so thank you, Jason. It's great to see you.
Great to see you,
Matt, a
Matt.
pleasure to meet
Matt.
you.
Yeah.
And Matt. And Matt, we got to talk. Every
I
time
know.
we're together, we
We gotta
need to talk.
I know. We got to
Okay.
find time. We keep talking, but other people are here. We can't. It's not personal enough. So don't
Right.
worry.
Harvey,
We need a more
Letterhack,
intimate setting, right?
We'll get to it.
Harvey Letterhack, thank you so much for letting me hang out
Well,
with you
thanks.
tonight.
This
I
has been a
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night. Have a good night, Jason. Have a good sleep, the rest of us.
All right, everybody. Well, I'll see you guys tomorrow night. We'll talk about immigration under Biden. We are out.